Good evening, everyone. I am A.V. Venugopal, Deputy Manager for Healthy Streets and Partnerships at ITDP India. And I will be your host for today's exciting webinar on designing livable streets, the way ahead. This webinar is co-hosted by WRI-India and ITDP India. In case you haven't grabbed yourself a cup of tea or coffee, you have a couple of minutes while I share the housekeeping rules. So please do so. So the conversation of creating livable streets certainly has become a lot more mainstream today than what it was a decade back. Many of you who are on the panel, who are attendees, have championed the cause for creating better streets and better cities across many years right now. Cities across India, from a Kochi to a Chennai, Coimbatore, Bangalore, Surat, Ahmedabad, Pune, Newton, Kolkata, Gangtok, Delhi, you name it, you have cities across India today who have good pilot projects. However, to imagine such a transformation probably a decade back, the many practitioners, city officials were championing the cause then. It would have been very difficult to imagine such a scenario back then. On that note, to set this conversation going, it would be great if all the panelists and attendees could share on the chat box which is your favorite street in India that you like or that you would like to visit and why. To set the ball rolling, I can share, not being biased because I'm based in Chennai, but then my favorite is a pedestrian plaza in Chennai. I try to cycle there at least once a week, probably with my wife or myself, grab a cup of coffee, see the kind of activities that happen there. And it's not the perfect street. It has areas to improve, certainly. But why I like it is because you see a wide variety of users, right from toddlers to women to elderly, spending time on the street, doing a lot of activities. And it's quite rare to see that in Indian streets. So that's why I like it. So take a few seconds, give it a thought, and kindly share your name, where you're from, what you do on the chat box, alongside which is your favorite street in India that you've been to or that you would like to visit. So for today's webinar, we have attendees on Zoom and I think on YouTube as well, ranging from students to professionals to city officials. We also have an esteemed panel of experts and decision makers. You would have seen their details on social media. We'll be introducing them shortly. And they've been championing the need for creating better cities for over a decade. A warm welcome to all the attendees and panelists to today's webinar. Before we get started, a few housekeeping rules to keep in mind. Attendees, you can use the Q&A box below to share your questions. Panelists, we might have less time to address questions from the Q&A box, so request you to feel free to respond to the questions in the Q&A box directly. Our team will be shortlisting a few questions to address them live as well. To everyone, if you like one of the questions that are raised, you can upvote it to bring to our team's attention. Please feel free to use the chat box to interact with one another. Make sure you address the chat to panelists and attendees so that your comment is visible to everyone. Without any further ado, I think let's get started. So I'd like to invite Ashwati Dilip, Managing Director, Institute for Transportation Development Policy, India, to share the welcome address.
Happy afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Venu. I think, thanks for setting that introductory sort of a bit, Venu. And to me, today is very special because I think the context for today's webinar was set wonderfully by our Honorable Prime Minister yesterday when he spoke at the post-budget webinar series on urban planning, development, as well as sanitation. And the point that he highlighted was that the future of our cities lies on the pillars of urban planning integrated with urban mobility. And he spotlighted this vision that he set for uninterrupted mobility in our cities. For those who've not heard his conversation, I request Venu to put the link on the YouTube so you can, listen to him speak after this enriching conversation. But sort of, bringing back what our Honorable Prime Minister said, this backbone for this uninterrupted mobility, I believe, is our streets. the streets where I walk to the corner store, where we've seen our children cycling to schools, where all of us, including many of our citizens, sort of rush to catch the bus at the bus stops or at the metro, where some of us use our two-wheelers, four-wheelers, where even our logistics plies to ensure that our Amazon and Swiggy reaches our homes on time. So it's important for these streets to be designed in a safe and livable manner, where there is adequate space for all of these uses, yet we do not encroach into one another's space. Now, the planning, designing, and implementation of these streets require definitely a multidisciplinary approach from urban planning and design, transportation planning, and engineering, as well as civil engineering. And as all of us know, it requires departments in our cities, from the development authority that works on planning networks of streets, new areas, and within our improving streets within our core areas, to urban local bodies and highways that are responsible for designing and implementation of our streets, to the traffic police, which is responsible for managing traffic on our streets, to departments, the utilities departments, who are responsible for the sewage, the water supply, the communications, the whole host of networks that run below our streets. Knowing all of this, today we have a diverse set of panelists who are here not to discuss can we create these safe, livable streets, but to discuss how can we create these safe, livable, and healthy streets, and how can we scale them. I'm really looking forward to this enriching conversation, and I hope all of you all have a great time. And let me pass it on back to Venu. Over to you, Venu.
Thank you, Ashwati, for the introductory words. I would now like to invite Dhaval, Head Integrated Transport, WRI-India, to share the context presentation that will orient the panel discussion to follow. Over to you, Dhaval.
Hi, Venu. Can you hear me? Hi, just give me a second. It's just asking me to open system preferences. Or
Sure.
Can Akanksha or Tanushree, any of you share the presentation?
Sure, I'll do.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so while Akanksha sort of brings the presentation up, I first of all thank you everyone for joining. I really also look forward to the discussion that ensues, and I promise not take more than 4 or 5 minutes maybe to just about set the context, which I think Ashwati has really very nicely done, taking off of the address of the Honorable Prime Minister and the clarion call. What I'm going to do right now is to sort of try and pose certain simple principles and maybe some numbers. One could argue might be a little old, etc. And to sort of just set the context that, where we are right now, it's very important to kind of take that under consideration. And how do we move from here? So, like Aswati and Venu also mentioned, right? I mean, today we're talking about how do we design livable streets. I mean, that's always sort of been the endeavor, I guess, or always should also be the endeavor. But just, can you move to the next slide? Before that, I want to take us all back a little bit, right? I mean, just some of the conventional methods in which we've evolved in our cities over the years, right? So how sort of some conventional methods of traffic engineering has shaped us to what we are right now. Just imagine, a time when there was very little traffic, roads just formed, etc. And everything was just moving two-way. Junctions, people would manage themselves at the intersections and go. Over time, as sort of traffic kept growing, land use sort of taken over by buildings, etc., more vehicles or more automobiles, now intersections would become problems, right? That's where so the obvious next step would be to signalize them. This happens in different ways still. Now what's happening is that, well, just a lot more automobile dependence is there, the lot more traffic, one intersection's red light reaches the previous intersection's sort of red light. What do you do now? One way is to just make them one-way streets, right? I mean, an example of that is some streets in Pune. If any of you are sort of from Pune, the FC Road, etc., or in Bangalore, right? I mean, one-way streets essentially just multiply the capacity of that one road to take twice the number of automobiles. Simply put, now traffic is sort of still growing, right? In some cases, what we do next is then we need to kind of build flyovers. Sometimes we skip the second step and just sort of build a flyover, be like, oh, there's going to be a problem in the future. Let's just build a flyover now. Fair enough. I mean, the focus is sort of moving vehicles, and in some cases it has to be, but like, where do we go from here, right? I mean, what happens when sort of traffic kind of grows? Engineering does definitely allow us to sort of reach situations such as these, right? But I mean, now, 10, 12 years ago, we used to look at cases from sort of Latin America, etc., kind of countries that did replicate us. Now we have our own experiences to learn from. Come 2020 sort of 3, right? I mean, so where do we go from here? Now, there is one thing that I think we all sort of agree by now is just more roads is going to lead to more demand, right? I mean, there are classic example we keep citing, just the next slide, is from LA, where where the Interstate 405 was widened, and in 5 years, the traffic speeds in peak were lesser than what it was before. So just go next. I mean, what it has done to us while sort of, one is sort of just increasing travel times, or what we call routinely congestion. It's also sort of squeezed pedestrians out of spaces to walk, right? So this is Bangalore, take Hyderabad, for instance, just go next, or Ahmedabad, or again, I mean, just Bangalore. And it's also not sort of really solved, quote unquote, solved our traffic problem some ways, right? I mean, testified by the fact, just the next slide, is sort of us featuring fairly high in just one of the traffic indexes, I mean, or anything. But I think most of us can say that traffic is one of our biggest concerns right now. So just go to the next slide. Right. I mean, and with that, we are also sort of seeing so many more people die on the roads, right? I mean, and if we are talking about our cities, consistently over the last decade, we've seen about 50% those die on streets are pedestrians, right? Just now, if we take next slide, Akanksha, if we take a little bit of step back again to see sort of how our cities actually move, again, this can be slightly old data because we don't have really sort of the most recent data from everywhere. But just if you see our modal shares, right, this is how people move. Just go to the next slide. Majority sort of shares are still in most cities pedestrians. I'm not saying that, you make everything for pedestrians or you don't need roads at all, right? It's sort of just what is needed is also sort of got to be a little data driven. And these numbers are hard to ignore now. Just go to the next slide. So we've always, we always have been talking about a paradigm shift from moving vehicles, right, to sort of moving, next slide, moving vehicles to moving people. While we've done that, there's always another thing that we've kind of been saying, right? Just the next slide is just a certain principles for urban roads agenda is that, nobody's saying you don't need roads, right? But the first focus has to be able to complete the network. So, just it focusing on kind of creating the missing links, focusing on better signal sort of coordination so that there are lesser delays, better parking management, just on-street parking, reducing that or even taking that out increases roadway capacity, etc. The other is sort of multiplying capacity. So it's not to make 100-meter roads right now, and kind of keep that provision, but to also see how do we, within the sort of 40 meters or so that we have, how can we move more people, right? I mean, I am obviously tending to public transport. And the other is sort of defining for universal access, right? I mean, nobody in our city should not be able to move just because we've not been able to design our city like that. So just the next slide. But and then the other thing, right? I mean, there is all of this infrastructure that we kind of invest in, right? From signals to signages to all of the other things. I mean, obviously they must self-regulate the traffic. And those that sort of do not follow those rules can kind of, is where the traffic police comes in to enforce. And in exceptional circumstances, they will have to come in to kind of regulate the traffic, right? But what's happening now is in a lot of our cities now, sort of situation is such that the entire kind of, I wouldn't say the entire burden, but there is a lot of sort of dependence on traffic police to ease congestion. It even rightly so, I would say right now, how do we even do without traffic police right now? I mean, we are sort of talking fairly high levels of sort of automobile just volumes that the police kind of needs to come to resolve. But how sustainable is this? I mean, I know that, our cities are building certain infrastructures, etc. But just keep going next, Akanksha. There is clearly sort of a problem of traffic engineering, right? It's a transport planning problem, like Aswati said. It's even a civil engineering problem. How do we build kind of faster now? Because just spiraling into construction has led to many other problems. A problem of flooding, or the most recent sort of not most recent, but the aggravating problem of air pollution, the problem of senior citizens now not being able to get out of their houses, and so on. Just so this is definitely an urban design problem also. It could be some other things. I'd love to hear from the panel. But I mean, we've also reached a point right now where we are not going to be able to drastically make any shift. This is just representative of this one sort of time in Mumbai, not very long ago, where a north-south flyover was shut for repairs, as it would have had to, because, infrastructure needs maintenance and repair. And it caused delays for up to 2 to 3 hours in the peak. So suddenly sort of shocking our network. How good is that, in terms of demand management, etc. So I think the question that I want to leave with is that, I mean, how do we go from here? We've always been talking about moving people and, focusing on moving people, designing streets but we are talking now dealing with sort of fairly aggravated problems in a lot of our cities of, let's say, high sort of parking demands, that is spilling over on footpaths and a lot of our carriageways and so on and so forth. So how do we move from here? I think that's the question I want to leave with, and I'm very excited to hear the panel's kind of thoughts. I'll with this pass over to Venu again, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Dhaval, for giving a comprehensive overview of the current situation and setting the context. Not adding further to it at all right now. I think it's time to jump right into the panel discussion. And for that, I invite my co-moderator, Akanksha Agarwal, Senior Program Associate, Sustainable Cities and Transport, WRI-India. Over to you, Akanksha.
Thank you, Venu. Good evening, all. I'll start by introducing the panelists for the session. Mr. Anshul Mishra, IAS Member Secretary, Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority. Dr. Anil Kumar B. Krampurohit, Police Inspector, Bengaluru Traffic Police. Mr. Sameer Kumar Sharma, Multimodal Integration Expert, NCRTC. Mr. Abhijit Lokre, Partner, The Urban Lab, Ahmedabad. Ms. Zora Muttabana, Associate Director, Lead Placemaking, Arcadis IBI Group. Mr. Vikas Thakur, Principal, PaveTech Consultants India, Pune. A very warm welcome to you all. A quick note to all the panelists. Some of the questions might be directed to one panelist. However, if you'd like to add, do raise your hand using the Zoom button. A reminder also to the audience that you can please share your questions in the Q&A box. The panelists will either respond to them in the Q&A box or take some of the questions live. With that, let's begin. So as highlighted in the context presentation, we are at a critical juncture in our cities, right? And street design can no longer be looked at from a single lens. We would like to get initial thoughts from you all. So what is your take on the current situation of street transformation across Indian cities? Like Dhaval said, how do we go from here? And then what seems to be the roadblock towards taking a multidisciplinary approach to street design? I request you all to keep your responses brief, but let's start. Anshul sir, would you like to go first?
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. We all know the complexity in dealing with this particular issue, and we know that there are many stakeholders involved in this kind of issue. So the solution, if you are asking a question directly, and if you want me to give a solution, there are two ways of looking at it. One, the situation which we are already in this complex situation, how to fix this, right? The second one, which I would like to discuss, is about how to prevent this situation from happening in future. So there are two ways to tackle this problem. One is short term. Immediately you can find some engineering solutions or some kind of traffic management solutions. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of design issue in this overall problem. We need to design our streets, our roads in such a way that we ensure that there is minimum congestion, and we don't have to worry too much about regulating the traffic. Most of the cities, if you see, they are all there's a very ad hoc basis management system which is going on. Traffic police has been struggling to regulate the traffic. Every time peak hour, you see this more number of traffic police personnel will be there, and they'll be struggling to manage the traffic. I think on the traffic management side, there should be some regulations to manage the vehicular traffic. That is one. There should be some design element in terms of signaling is just one. There are other signages and all that which can regulate traffic in a better way and ensure that other stakeholders like pedestrians also get to move smoothly. What I feel is that in India, the lane changing is one major issue. So people are all rushing every time. So lane changing is definitely not followed, and people don't use their indicators, etc. Some kind of regulation is required on that. I mean, these are the immediate things which we can do. On the design side, definitely we need to design our streets much better, and we need to have signages. We need to have the markings which are absent mostly. Once you do the design, the next part is to engage the stakeholders, engage the users of the street to train, to make them aware. Basically, that is design can nudge, but unless people know how to read the design, how to read the markings, it will not be of any use. So that is a challenge which we need to address. On the larger, more fundamental, kind of intervention which cities can cities can undertake, initiatives, is about how to minimize the use of private vehicles and how to maximize the use of public transport. All of us know that we need to push for more public transport. The modal share of public transport is definitely very important. How to do that? Now, I have understood that many cities have used the concept of TOD, concept of densification, which ensures that more number of people use public transport. And the car dependency reduces. I don't know whether it really happens or it will happen in Indian cities or not, but the point is, if you don't give people spaces to live near the core of the city or near the CBD, obviously people will have to move. And public transport has its own limitations. It can move basically in one direction to carry large number of people. It cannot crisscross easily along the city. So TOD, transit-oriented development, is definitely one area which we need to look into. I think and the densification policy needs to be adopted by the cities to ensure that more public transport is used and less dependence on cars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts. Quite insightful. I'd like to call upon Zohra. Zohra, would you like to go next?
Hello. Thank you, everyone. So I'll jump straight into my response actually to this one. It's a very interesting question. And it has how has street transformation worked over the years? I think we have come very far in the process in transforming streets, but I feel like we're still we're still messing up in the process. Some of our outcomes have been brilliant, like we've been able to create really good streets. But in terms of the process, we're not taking the right steps. Like we're trying to literally jump to the final product. It's like, we haven't taught a child A plus B plus C, but we are directly teaching them equations, how to solve complex equations. So what does end up happening then is that, there is one street here and one street there that is beautiful, but the rest of the network is just not functioning efficiently. So one of the biggest, I think, hurdles that we have and what we could possibly do to, change this is measure correctly. Our measurements are not correct. We still in the traffic world, we still measure vehicle LOS. Everywhere there is level of service that talks about vehicles. We are not measuring a multimodal LOS. We're not looking at performance measures that actually measures a street on how it's performing for different modes. And until that happens, we will never be able to capture what the real gap is for the other modes. We will always look at it from a vehicle sense, and we will always see that, there is so much demand for vehicles, capacity is limited, let's build a flyover. That will always be an automatic response. So we must first measure correctly. Once we measure correctly, we must look at a larger framework that can resolve the issues. So network capacity augmentation, for example, that what Dhawal was speaking about. It's a necessity. You cannot jump to one street without first looking at a network, because every street performs specific function within a network. And then you have to design according to what the function of the street is within the network. Every street does not need to be brilliant. Every street does not need to be a pedestrian plaza. Geometries need to be designed by traffic engineers. Urban designers should not have to design geometries. But unfortunately, we are stuck with standards instead of being stuck with a performance measure. So even when for a particular street, a median might be more damaging than helpful, we create a median because IRC says we have to create a median. So I think there is measurement that we have to work on. We have to work on performance measure based designs rather than standard based design. And we have to go from a big to small method. We have to first figure out the network and then, focus on streets. I mean, it's great to have good streets, don't get me wrong, but we also need to start a little higher. I hope I'm not on over time.
Thank you, Zora. Thank you. We'd move on. I'd like to call upon Sameer Sharma, sir. Sir, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, good afternoon. So we have made good progress, I would say, in terms of creating awareness, in terms of also doing a lot of pilots. But I feel that now let's start working on network level. And at network level, when we see the city, the first thing comes to my mind that how are comprehensive mobility plans or other documents which are actually created on city level, speaking about our street design and related things. And I find that it is not actually. The street design, the way I have understood, is more of a context-driven initiative, where you have to really define the streets on the city level with the different contexts. Now, we can do one pilot in one of the retail corridor, and then we can say, okay, we have made good progress. However, the city may have 15 different contexts. The areas where there's a movement of the freight, there's areas where large people moving to the offices, there's areas where there's a transport node, or especially public transport node, where lakhs and people are actually traveling. There are different contexts in the different parts of the city. And there's a different land uses, there are different right-of-ways. It's a very complex situation. And we pick certain streets, and then we say that we design it. And there we feel a lot of difficulties because we probably not divided these zoning of the streets on the city level. And once we do that, this is the context of our entire network, the facilities will emerge very easily. I mean, once I know what is the land use, what is the category of the road, what is the priority of that road, who is using that particular road, the design standards and other things will emerge very easily from there. And I would tend to say that that should be the first exercise which probably each of our cities should do, that which city means what. I would like to indicate, as previous speaker said about the design standards, our design standards are very old. So we as a transportation planner community actually only divided our hierarchy of the roads based on the accessibility and mobility, which is a very old concept of OSTO and all that when we used to graduate, and it has not changed. But if you really see some of the very modern thinking cities, they have introduced a new parameter called land use. And as soon as, so we have urban and we have rural. Within urban, there may be 10 categories of the to define the context. There are cities which say boulevards, they say avenues. These are the names which actually defines the context of that and the facilities required for that. So I think on the city level, we really need to reform our mobility plans, our design standards, to really bring in this perspective that there are different requirements of the different users, which has to be actually met. I would not even criticize any flyover. Flyover may be necessary for certain corridors where mobility is really required, or there's a through trips and large people are moving to the long distances and the interaction with the other land user are limited. One can really create certain mobility corridors, there's no deny. And there I say that this is a balancing the need. We rather than, only for private vehicles, we can't create a different situation where we say that we just balance the requirement based on the context. That's the first point. The second, I would like to say in terms of the capacity of our various bodies, whether the government or even from the consultancy side who are supporting. I think there's a requirement for, doing enhancement where really these contexts can be understood, these design standard can be laid out in various places. And there's a lot of more has to be done probably from the government side and then to be supported from the private sector side. That is the second point. And the third point I would like to say from the policy dimension, I think the biggest challenge is the parking and the hawker or hawking zones which are there in our cities. And we are not comparable to many cities. So while we have the policies, parking policies in many of the cities, however, on micro level, how we have analyzed and really got the breakthrough through kind of creating the parking management on the street is really a question. We have not really done a lot of work on the parking management. Still, we are kind of doing bits here and there. So a lot of work is required. Then what is the right way actually of really managing in different context-driven areas, the parking and hawking. I think if we are able to do this, probably we can manage things much better. That's my initial remark.
Thank you, sir. Very important points raised by you. Moving on, Abhijit, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon. One thing, I've been working in this area for the last 20 years now. And yet when I look at which are your favorite roads, I see the same names all over again. I see same JM Road in Pune. I see some streets in Chennai, and then I see CG Road in Ahmedabad. So really over 20 years, we have not really made a lot of headway. We need first to accept this. When I started work in Pune about 7 years back, I think Pune was onto a very good thing. Pune had hired urban designers to work with the municipal corporation. And I don't know why that never got replicated. Because too often when I engage with municipal corporations, the struggle is with the engineers. And I don't blame the engineers for not seeing our point of view, if I may say, because that's the way civil engineering and traffic and transport engineering is taught. So they have been trained for a long, long time to think in a certain way. And that's why it's very important to have within government another group of people which thinks differently and to constantly engage with the engineers. In Pune Municipal Corporation, I found this to be working quite well. Also in Pimpri-Chinchwad, I found the engineers to be having a lot of sensitivity towards street design. I think that is one thing that we definitely need to look at, is having more people working within government and more urban designers working with government. The second thing I think some of the earlier speakers have talked about, but I'll re-emphasize that. Again, we look at street design as a project, a standalone project which happens on 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers street network somewhere. We really need to look at pan city, and we also need to look at parking and public transport along with just street design. Otherwise, these become isolated projects. For example, does the city have a parking policy? Does the city charge for parking? How is it being enforced? Is the traffic police on your team or not? So there are multiple stakeholders which have to be taken on board. Otherwise, all of you and me who are all on this call or in this webinar, we all know what we want. We are all on the same side. What we really require is to bring the other stakeholders to see our point of view and to work with them, engage with them so that we can get more and more such streets. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Abhijit, for sharing your thoughts. Moving on, Dr. Anil Kumar, would you like to share your thoughts?
Thank you. Good evening to one and all. Basically, as traffic police, what we perceive on the roads is that a particular infrastructure which is already existing, a particular set of vehicular traffic which is already there on the road, and everyone wants traffic police to manage the situation as it is at the present. We come into existence only when every infrastructure is at place and n number of vehicles are there. We actually always remember the city planners well in advance. If we can work in collaboration, we know the practical difficulty which is existing on the road, where the detour is occurring. Once where if we are closing the road for some developmental works like metro construction or some underpass construction, if we have blocked the road, where exactly the problem erupts. So a lot of such insights we have practically in our daily experience. So when we talk of particularly if you take Bengaluru traffic police into consideration, we are around 5,300 staff, almost taking care of nearly 14,000 kilometers of road network and more than 1 crore number of vehicular population. When you talk of streets, they want traffic calming measures to be at place, but the available road infrastructure is not capable of taking the entire burden of vehicles moving on a particular set of road. And almost all the schools and colleges and even the offices start at one particular time and they close at one particular time. So there is no staggering of workplace or work timings. So as traffic police, we have to stand on the road and somehow manage the traffic. This has become an inevitable thing for us. But thanks to the recent developments in artificial intelligence, for example, Bengaluru city, we have installed nearly 50 locations artificially intelligence enabled signal lights so that they judge the queue length and they enable the movement of the traffic. But as far as the livable streets are concerned, the next roadblock would be to have a coordinated efforts of all the departments and stakeholders who are responsible for the final outcome. And when we were students in the colleges, we used to hear that a concept of some insect is which is very good at eating Parthenium hysteroporus, insect named as Zygogramma bicolorata, was imported from New Zealand and it was released in the fields of Karnataka. But after the insects reached Belgaum and some other suburban areas, they preferred other paddy and other crops rather than this one. So Parthenium hysteroporus, they started growing extensively, but we were not able to address. For example, if we have heard of some policies at place at Virginia or some other LA or San Francisco or any other Western countries. If we think that the same rule and same formula applies here, and if we replicate that in our condition, probably it may not suit. So all the planners, you are totally well aware of that fact. And every Indian city is unique in its tradition as well as topography and everything. For example, if you take up our Bengaluru city alone, we have a circular ring road, outer ring road, inner ring road, like circles the road structure is. So where you have a grid system of roads, that type of a system will not work in circular roads. So we have to take into account the typical topographical existing situation of each and every place. For example, in Bengaluru, if I Google how many different types of localities are there, I get around 2,794 localities. And all these localities, for example, if you take up how the geographical area of Basavanagudi is different from MG Road, and that too is different from Banashankari, and how the road use pattern and what is the zonal and even modal share of different types of traffic or movement of pedestrians or some other thing. It is very difficult to manage. So we have to integrate all the available information. For example, as traffic police, we have signal lights, we have footages of CCTV across the road, at the junctions, and in the mid block. Probably the city planners and designers can definitely make use of all these footages to study how and in what type a vibrant city looks like, or a vibrant VD can look like, a street, how we can do this and what modifications are required, because much of the things are retrofit. For example, what is already existing cannot be totally changed. Only we can reintroduce or bring some changes. So basically the total concept of livable city or livable street, we have to dependent on all the information which is available on that particular stretch of road or VD. So probably then the things will be all right. As a traffic policeman, I have seen many a times the traffic police perception is lost or forgotten at the decision making level, because once these fellows are involved, they will give you very precise and very informative and practically implementable solutions. That's what I feel like. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. Quickly moving on, we'll move to Vikas, sir. Sir, look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief. I really agree with some of the points raised by the earlier speakers, that rather than having one odd street here and there, I mean, you of course see a lot of street works being implemented in tier 1 cities, and also now the tier 2 and tier 3 cities are following suit. I mean, if you just look at the data, I was just scanning through some of the data on urban roads, the network length. We found out that it's almost like 5 lakh kilometers of urban roads in India, 5 lakh kilometers, out of which we actually did a segregation of the road widths in Pune city. We happen to work in Pune. So we found out that almost 75 to 80% of the streets are just below the width of 12 meters. And if you look at the street works or what has been happening in the street transformation projects, you would see that all the streets about 12 meter, 18 meter, 24 meters have been transformed or retrofitted to, I mean, fall in place with these urban street guidelines. But unless and until you also look at these smaller streets, which actually do cater to a lot of people, I mean, everyone lives across these smaller streets. So unless and until you look at these streets and then have cost-effective solutions, basic solutions, I mean, you don't need to be very provide very hi-fi facilities or upgrade aesthetically appealing things on these streets, but at least, I mean, ensure that they are walkable. They're walkable and connected to the overall network. Then in that case, if a few cities take up this initiative to take it on a larger scale, I mean, to ensure the network connectivity on the smaller streets, and with cost-effective solutions, then I think it should go a long way for making more people come towards this solution. I mean, I experienced this a lot because I mean, Pune, I'm fortunate that Pune has been leading in developing these streets. So we have more than 100 kilometers. But I always feel when I go out with my kids, why this street couldn't be integrated into that network? I mean, that would actually encourage more people to walk rather than use their vehicles. These are just my brief thoughts on. And I mean, the block I see as an implement is the cost. I mean, if you look at the implementation of these street works across these tier 1 and tier 2 cities, the costs are exorbitant. I mean, I really doubt how many cities would be able to incur these costs in developing these street projects or pilot projects. So you drastically need to look at some solutions wherein you reduce the cost of these works and yet you be able to provide serviceable streets or walkable streets to everyone. So these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very valid and solid points raised by you all. And just to stress again that looking forward doesn't only, it involves looking beyond pilots. We cannot then now just keep looking at the pilots. We need to look beyond and at the network level. And also the interventions must be in all areas. We cannot single out a discipline or a department or any aspect of when it comes to street design. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Venu, would you like to take the next question?
Yeah, it's interesting to read the conversations in the chat space as well, and we have a lot of questions. So we request the panelists, if you'd like to respond to some of the questions on the Q&A box, kindly do so. We'll be taking some questions live as well based on the time in hand. Zohra, the next question is to you, and on similar lines, Abhijit, we'd like to hear from you following the same, that many cities, as you know, have been exploring these models of design competitions, which have a lot of students participating in it, young practitioners, and even others. And we discussed in the earlier discussion about the importance of network planning, the need to look at things more holistically, because also touched upon now on the importance of getting the fundamentals right at times as well. At times, there is an inclination more on beautification at times as well, and missing out on the holistic approach. It might be because the brief itself does not mandate the need for it. Zohra, from your experience, your approach to design process itself would have evolved over the years and working with different teams. Since we have a good audience of students and young practitioners listening in, could you share a little more about how your team has been approaching multidisciplinary work when you take up a particular project?
Sure, Venu. It's a great question. And actually, our approach on design has changed quite drastically in the last 10-15 years, I would say. I mean, when we started, right, as designers, our approach was about let's give the maximum space to pedestrians. Let's reclaim all this space, make very tight corners, and as much as possible refer to guidelines, and make pretty bollards, make street lights, and all of that stuff. And then because coincidentally my company also has a lot of traffic engineering teams, and they also work on signaling kind of systems and intersection efficiencies. We got an opportunity in Chennai actually to work on intersections together. And that is when really, we had this dialogue within the company. Surprisingly, even within the company, we did not have that dialogue that often on how an intersection needs to be designed. Do all intersections need to be like this real compact, or do intersections also need to perform a certain function? They need to balance the needs of pedestrians for sure, but along with vehicles who are moving in different kind of directions. So intersections actually become a really critical part of street design. I find it really difficult when, you plan the street and you leave out an intersection. But once you have a traffic engineer's point of view, you have simulations done. Now, simulations could also be manipulated. We all know that. But the idea of, having that continuous flow of traffic for all modes, it logically sits well. And that was a really great knowledge exchange for our teams as well, where the designers learned about traffic engineering principles, the traffic engineers learned about the needs of pedestrians. They heard us out. And what I think we were listening to earlier, it's urban design in the government is great, but even within the consultancy, sometimes, we need to balance the work, the way that we work and the way we approach certain kind of designs. There are many interventions, actually. There are many innovations globally that can be used on signaling systems, maybe on the way an intersection is designed to respond to a signaling system, etc., etc. Like a small example for it is a pedestrian refuge. We got stuck with the fact that we need a pedestrian refuge at an intersection. The traffic engineering wanted an extra right turning lane because it wanted the vehicles to turn right, you know. So how do you have that dialogue and then find a middle ground so that both are, you know, both needs are served in a way? So it cannot be a radical method. I feel like there is great value in having a multidisciplinary team where traffic engineers also learn about the pedestrian needs and designers also learn about these requirements. So I think that has been the greatest learning for all of us, to be able to become more conscious about the fact that there are many different ways of solving the same problem, and we need to find a way that works well for all users.
Thank you, Zora, for sharing with references and examples as well. Abhijit, over to you. You are someone who has experience in the academia space as well, and your journey of many years of practice also is at play. So what is your reflection on the same, and for the young practitioners and students who are listening in particular?
Yeah, so one thing is that the design has to be as simple as possible. This is something that I've learned over hard experiences, especially when we did the BRT. Too complex a design and your contractor on ground is not able to do it. You really need to make your detailing as simple as possible. And I would give the same advice to young practitioners also. Sometimes as designers, we really want to do a lot of complicated design, or we want to use different kinds of material in our design. Unfortunately, we do not have the kind of expertise in contractors to execute these designs with the kind of finesse we think it should be. What I have definitely learned is that there is a world of difference between interior design and street design. You can have a lot of control over interior design, but in street design, the tolerances are much different. So one thing definitely is the detailing. The second thing is, again, keep on working with your contractor, because your contractor actually has a lot of good ideas because they have executed similar projects. They understand the site much better. So one thing that I have learned, and I kind of keep on doing it now in the projects that we do, is engaging with contractors, because they understand how to execute on ground. As far as young, even my teaching at CEP Street Design, I do like to tell my students to be as imaginative and bold as possible. One thing that we keep on emphasizing is you need to know why you're designing this street. So there has to be some vision for doing whatever you're doing. Otherwise, there are enough guidelines floating around on the internet. You can download anything and you can get your guidelines. But ultimately, you have to understand what is your ultimate vision. For example, when we ask students to design streets around CEPT University, now it's just not CEPT University there, but there are a lot of schools for primary and pre-primary children there. So how do you bring that perspective into your design? So, we do engage with students and, get them to think about all kinds of users. And I think that is very important to get a design that works for all. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Abhijit. Anshul, sir, I think you had your hand raised. Would you like to respond?
I have 2 quick points. One relates to the question which I see in the chat box. The Shreyans has asked a question about TOD. Why TODs are not designed for accommodating LIG and MIG residences. Yeah, that is one issue. If we increase FSI along the TOD, we must keep in mind that the dwelling units should be made affordable. Now, I can tell you that in Chennai's TOD policy, which we have proposed, which has gone to government for approval, we have given 2 provisions. One, that we have stipulated a range of range between which the dwelling units, the area of dwelling units, the carpet area of dwelling units can be provided from 90 to 120 square meter. So maximum limit is 120 square meter, which will be mandatory. We cannot cross that if we want to get higher FSI. The other thing which we are saying is that for all these developments, 30% of the overall dwelling units must be under the affordable housing criteria, that is 60 square meter or below 60 square meter or below 90 square meter. There are two categories. So we have to emphasize that you should have 30% of your houses within that criteria. So this ensures that you have more supply of affordable housing along the transit corridors, and people can use more public transport. So that is one thing I wanted to explain. The other thing on the design issue, which was being discussed just before by other speakers, and I think there is the students. I'm sure a lot of students have joined here. So students have to understand that. I mean, when we talk about the vision, basically they have to understand that there is politics and economics of streets. So politics, basically, who is occupying these streets, right? So most of the private vehicles are occupying the street, be it four-wheeler or two-wheeler. In India, one of the phenomena which is hardly discussed is that two-wheelers. Like two-wheelers are a big phenomena on the Indian streets, and this is basically partly the solution also, because these are not cars and they don't occupy as much space as cars occupy, and these are the most efficient, quickest mode of transportation for lower middle class person. So that's why people use two-wheelers. It is a sad state of affairs that the state has not able to provide better transportation for these people who are potential public transport users. So that is one. So what I'm saying is that we need to understand that whoever is using the street, there is a power structure, and we need to bring egalitarianism or equality in this power structure, and everybody who uses the street shall have the equal right to access to the street and use it, right? That is one. Other aspect is economics of the street. So economics of street is very, very simple. A lot of people use the street for their, for income. So vendors, hawkers are definitely one of them. Many times we see hawkers and vendors as encroachers. When they have no other way to earn their livelihood, they are very permanent stakeholders on the streets. We need to find ways to handle them, to regulate them. And it is not an easy task. So we need to find places, zones, and all. We have already discussed so many things. So that is another one. So unless we understand the politics and economics of streets, we will not be able to design our streets properly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for responding to this question as well as the one raised in the Q&A. I really wish, while I was also studying, there was no platform of webinars and forums to interact with experts as much. But Abhijit, Zohra, Vikas, Anil Kumar, Samir, all of you, thank you for sharing through your experiences. I'm sure it's very informative for all of us on the call. Vikas, would you like to respond? I think you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah, just to add to what Abhijit said, he raised a very valid point. I mean, especially for the new, the students or the practitioners, keeping the designs as simple as possible actually helps a lot in the implementation, and also making it digestible for people to actually take up these projects, because it reduces your cost. So that, I think, is one of the key things that the designers need to look at. I mean, try to keep it simple, not to say that you do away with the usability or the effectiveness of the project, but try to see in your design that you can use maximum of the existing infrastructure or maximum of the existing materials rather than going for fancy materials. So that actually helps a lot in delivering and also making these street projects happen.
Thank you, Vikas. Anshul, sir, we'd like to circle back to you for the next question. Sir, in your current role as Member Secretary of Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, you are driving the process of creation of the third master plan of Chennai alongside many other initiatives on multimodal integration, road safety, and a lot more. And this would certainly entail bringing together different departments, experts from multiple domains to work together as well. So it will be enriching for all of us, for all the participants, to hear how you have been approaching this particular role.
Yeah, very important question. So, most of the master plans of various cities, they don't achieve their goals. They are hardly successfully implemented because of lack of coordination among departments. Now, master plan is prepared by CMDA in Chennai's case. I'm sure other cities will also have similar kind of situation where somebody prepares a plan and it is to be implemented by somebody else. There is a problem, there's a big gap. So this time we have consciously, decided that we will engage the departments, the critical departments. I think 10 departments, around 9 to 10 departments are there, who need to go through this process along with us from the very beginning. They should have a participation in the master plan preparation. They should, in fact, when we say the vision for Chennai and we prepare master plan based on that vision, we say that other departments should have a vision for their own departments, and they should integrate their vision with the overall vision of the master plan. Unless that is done, it is difficult. We are trying to reach out to all the departments separately, through workshops also, and individually also. We are trying to do that. So that coordination aspect is very important, and it is more and more important for the transport planning, because everybody comes on the street as far as the the roles of, and it is happening. So the traffic police, the utilities like Metro Water, the GCC, the Electricity Board, and there are many other such departments which who have on the streets. So the coordination is definitely very important, and it has to be institutionalized in the sense that everybody should adopt the goals of a master plan formally, and they integrate seamlessly with the overall plan. Having said that, we are also trying to prepare a master plan with with an understanding that there are other aspects which we need to be sensitive to, we need to take into account, and that is gender sensitive planning. For example, we need to plan, we need to prepare a plan which is gender sensitive. Most of the time this is seen as a last item on your agenda, right? So that is a big problem. In any of the discussions, if you see, everything is said, and then the second last will be environment planning, and third last, and this last one will be gender related issue. So that is the problem which we need to understand. We need to mainstream these things, to bring more focus on them, and then prepare a plan for the city. Otherwise, it will never be holistic, it will never be comprehensive. So those are the challenges we are facing. By basically, we have to create a new language and make them understand this language, why we are planning for city, and what is the city going to look like in future. So these are my few thoughts on the effort we are making. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Akanksha, back to you.
Thanks, Venu. Our next question is to Dr. Anil Kumar. Sir, traffic congestion is often a label that comes associated when we talk of the city of Bengaluru. But not to forget that Bengaluru is also one of the few Indian cities that is known for its good streets, cycling infra, and the public spaces. So our question is, how can enforcement support more of such initiatives to scale up such transformations throughout the city and state?
As the traffic police of Bengaluru city, we have been subjected to maximum criticism. In spite of all the criticism, we are able to make the city more livable with all our efforts to keep the traffic on the road moving. At any given time, there will be a lot of developmental activities as far as the infrastructure is concerned, will be going on here or there. For example, now metro work is going on. So a lot of other infrastructural development work is going on. We have to support all these things. And at the same time, we need to ensure that people reach their destination for the various purposes as early as possible. So in order to ensure this, we have imbibed the maximum, that is the latest technology which is available at the international level, like artificial intelligence based adaptive signals, which enhances the green time. Green time is maximally utilized. Sometimes in the traditional signalating system, we used to see that a lot of delay would be there. For example, no vehicle is there, but still 90 seconds of green light is given to an empty road. So such situation is being avoided here. And now our priority has been movement of the vehicles rather than the making booking cases. Definitely, I completely agree. Dandam Dashagunam. So if you don't enforce the rules and regulations, the road will become a place for a lot of accidents. So in order to ensure that roads are kept safe by way of enforcing traffic rules and regulations, we have an option of involving the general public, that is the participation of the community into our policing system. So in this direction, we have associated with an NGO. I Change My City is the app which can be downloaded from the Google Play Store, and even a person who is noticing the violation can send the photograph of the violation, so that after verification, we will raise the notice against the person who has committed that violation. So by this, we are having a presence of some eagle's eye. So that is, if people are on Bengaluru city roads, will definitely know that they are being watched. Nearly 1,100 cameras have already been installed under various schemes. Another 7,000 artificial intelligence enabled cameras are coming up, which are capable of artificial number plate recognition, and they are even capable of locating or recording the automatically number plate. They can recognize and send the photographs. So by this, almost on an average per month, we are generating around 30,000 violations without physically any traffic policeman stopping a vehicle. So with this involvement of this modern technology, we have been enhancing the mobility of the Bengaluru city. So in the pipeline, lot of auspicious, very good programs are in queue to make the Bengaluru city more livable, and to ensure that the people reach their destination at the earliest. Multimodal integration and a lot of things are being worked out, along with various other stakeholding agencies, and thanks to the involvement of Department of Urban Land Transport and Urban Development Department, BBMP, BWSSB. So every 15 days, once in 15 days, we have Apex committee meeting at the state level, which is headed by not less than our Honorable Principal Secretary to the Government of Karnataka, and all the commissioners of all the stakeholding agencies. They are getting involved in ensuring what all the action need to be done. So both long-term actions and short-term interventions are being made, and probably in a very short while, when all the routes to this metro are become operational, probably Bengaluru becomes more favorable for public transport. For example, now nearly 6,600 BMTC buses are operating across the city and carrying around 58 lakh people every day, and around 6 to 10 lakh people are traveling in metropolitan metro. And if the metro carrying capacity increases to around 25 lakh, probably individual vehicles people don't prefer to use. And with streets designed for pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, probably they may shift from the motorized vehicles into pedestrian mode. And also the last mile connectivity being ensured by a lot of other startups, probably Bengaluru city will become most preferred place. And it is said that it is like a magnet. Those who come to Bengaluru city for one or the other reason, they never want to leave the city because of the comfort that this city offers. So probably just for the sake of heck of this traffic and other things, people leaving the city will not be a situation in the future also. So as Bengaluru Traffic Police, we always want our people to reach the destination comfortably and in the given time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking us through some of the initiatives that the city is taking to improve the experience of mobility for the citizens. And also glad that you stressed on the importance of community participation in the process of street design. My next question would be to Sameer, sir. Sir, you have more than 30 years of experience in the field of transport planning, and you've also developed quite a few traffic engineering and road safety solutions. So what, according to you, are some of the solutions that have worked in the urban context of India?
So traffic, if you are asking basically for the problem, the solution for the problem of traffic congestion, I would tend to say that the only, way we can really manage is by a two-step strategy. So one is that we call it push and pull strategy, basically, that if we are able to push a lot of people towards public transport, and really we can pull rather people towards public transport by creating a public transport more attractive. So it should be, very reliable, high speed, with reasonable door-to-door mobility, with good last mile, multimodal integration. So if we can make really the public transport more attractive to the people, and especially two type of trip purposes. So one is the work trips, which generally account for 60% in any city, any big city, and education trip, which generally account for 20%. And they all accumulate in 1 or 2 hours in the morning and 1 or 2 hours in the evening. If we are able to push more people in these hours towards public transport, that really going to resolve a lot of issues, because a lot of this congestion which happens only in the peak hour can be managed. The second is the demand management, and we call it push strategy, where we have a different tools for doing the demand management. In our context, the simplified form could be the parking itself, where the parking prices becomes very high in certain hours or in certain areas, so that the people have are generally, made their private mode less attractive. On one side, we make the public transport more attractive, more accessible, more available at all time, all the city places. And on the other hand, we really make the private vehicle less attractive in certain part of the places, certain time of the day, certain places. So if somebody is traveling for his social purposes with his family, I don't mind him going with the car. But if he's traveling, he's a regular commuter and travels 9 to 10 every day. And if I really calculate the number of lanes required, if everybody start moving by their car, maybe 100 lanes in one road will be required. So I can't afford with whatever principle we say. Therefore, the only solution moving forward we have understood is that we really create a good public transport system, and there are various elements of it on which we should emphasize, and gradually push us towards developing more demand management solutions, which can gradually, be implemented. Of course, gradually, because if public transport system is not good, then we will always be restrictive in terms of demand management strategy, because we are not providing any alternative. In that context, in fact, the street designs and walkability improvement becomes more and more important, because 30-35% of the people just simply walk. And when I go to drop my children to the school, which is half a kilometer, I take my car, because they can't walk to the school. And in fact, we can't allow them to walk to the school, because we understand that the intersections are unsafe, the pedestrians are occupied by the cars, footpaths probably not existent in many of the places, and people don't care about if a children is actually crossing the street. So starting from the behavior, enforcement, infrastructure, everything will require a lot of rethinking. And the street is probably one of the elements on which we can start, and then we can start enforcing, and probably through multimedia engagement with the stakeholder, we can start doing that. So I think that is what I understand is the way forward for our cities. Otherwise, I mean, we'll all keep having 4 cars, 5 cars in one house. We'll not have any space to walk. Every city will convert into the parking lot. So I think we need to start pushing people towards public transport. And the first step is to improve public transport.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, sir. I'll quickly move on to Vikas, sir. Sir, from an implementation perspective, translating the design into implementation is often a challenging bit. So in your perspective, are there any common areas where designers need to be mindful about with respect to the utility design and implementation in specific and particular?
See, looking at the actual execution or implementation of these street works in the city, the utility management or the utility works actually occupies a very big chunk of this street project as such. I mean, if you look at the cost aspects, it almost in some of these projects, the pilot projects, or even some of the ongoing projects in some of these cities, it occupies almost 50% of your cost. So one of the aspects is not only does it add to the cost, but it also adds to the time required for actually doing the project. So my thought on this is during the design stage, the urban designer, the the city planners, and also the project management consultants involved who would be actually executing, they need to be very judicious on selection of the integration of these utilities, or I would say non-integration of these utilities. I mean, you need to skip some of these utilities which are not required. I mean, I see a lot of projects where, because you are doing a street project, the utility department would come up with his own utility. Okay, I also want to put in my utility. I mean, most of the times the actual requirement of this utility, whether it's required or not, just gets overlooked. And see, in India, I mean, most of our speakers earlier, they talked about this point. I mean, unless and until you don't have a fixed land use, we are not going to be able to design our streets for 50 years. I mean, we just need to come out of this, that with a street project, this needs to be there for 50 years, or no one should be able to dig that. Not that I'm saying that they should be digging it every now and then, but then you cannot design a street that's not going to be dug or excavated for 50 years. I mean, yes, 10, 15 years, you might have to do some retrofitting or some work with the utilities. So in the implementation stage, it's very important for the designer and the project consultant and also the city engineers to make sure that only the very critical utilities which actually look required to be integrated in the project should be looked at. Otherwise, you can skip some of these utility works which will help you deliver projects faster and at a cost effective rate. I mean, you make it cost effective. So that was one of the point. The other point in implementation was also touched by the earlier speakers, the aesthetic part or the material part. Many of these pilot projects have been showcase projects, and you see all types of materials, the colorful concretes and the colorful pave blocks and stuff. See, once after a period of 1 or 2 years, no one is bothered on how colorful the street is or how which color has been used. It's just a utility part of it. So I mean, definitely you can look at cost effective materials or local materials which would lower down the cost. So if, I mean, as per my understanding, these are the two issues that the utilities and the usability aspect. I mean, rather than looking at the aesthetic aspects, try to focus on the usability aspects. So these 2 points, I think, should be the focus whenever you work on the, I mean, for the urban designers as well as the project consultants and the local body engineers as well.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Win.
Thank you, Akanksha. It's been a great discussion so far, and thanks to the panelists for responding to some of the questions already in the Q&A box. We urge all of you to keep an eye out and respond live. In the interest of time, we may not be able to take as many questions, but as a last question from our side, if you could share like rapid fire, quick responses from your side. We've already discussed what are some of the steps that cities can take in some of the responses that have come cross-cutting from the policy side to a procurement, which we've not discussed as much, but if you could share some thoughts on that, design, implementation, and the surround system of academia, etc. as well. So we'd like to go around the room. I think Anshul Mishra sir had to step out. So if you could share probably 2 to 3 or more key points that you feel that cities could take towards bringing a multidisciplinary approach on this front, that would be fantastic. Zohra, if you're there, would you like to respond first, followed by Abhijit?
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. I think number one, like I was saying, is that we need to measure correctly, and we need to include all users when we do our measurements. And second is that yes, we need to reform the way our departments have been structured, and instead of having a roads department and a roads and bridges department, let's have a streets department that has a multidisciplinary team. And I would really love if traffic engineers also attend these kind of sessions, so they also hear our side of the story. Maybe we need to have urban designers going and teaching in traffic engineering schools, and traffic engineers come and teaching in urban design schools, because we really need that knowledge sharing and cross learning. So that's my overall take.
Thank you, Zohra. Over to you, Abhijit, and we'd love to hear from Sameer sir after that.
Yeah, I think I will just second what Zohra said. Have multidisciplinary teams working within local governments, have urban designers working with traffic transport engineers. And I think slowly as you move ahead, you will see that, there is more and more of a consensus and a win-win for all. Thanks.
Sameer sir, would you like to share your thoughts? And Anil Kumar sir, if you would like to go next.
Yeah, so I would say that, as I said, capacity building of the government departments crucial. And as other panelists also said, that we need to have the people from different disciplines there, and they have to really understand each other's perspective, and then we can come to the common ground. I would also say that all the students and the designers put more emphasis on the stakeholder consultations and design context. That's very, very important. Many of the places you'll find that the local requirements are not met, and we only try to actually match the design standards. So the local businesses, local street occupants and all that focus, if it is coming, then I think we are going to have a more successful design solutions. That's my take.
Anil Kumar sir.
My take is only 2 important things. One is involving all the stakeholders and taking very minute details. And the second one is sharing the knowledge each of the department is having, and what all the databases they are having. If it is shared on a common platform, probably designing of road or a street will be more comfortable. And probably third one is ours is a mixed type of traffic and other geographical changes. So hence each and every place needs to be treated in a different way. Thank you.
Vikas, would you like to?
Just to add a few points. Yes, of course, capacity building of the local urban engineers, the contractors, and the project consultants. And definitely having a team of in-house urban planners or urban designers does help a lot in intervention in these smaller projects. So that's actually a very good initiative taken by Pune, Pimpri-Chinchwad, which actually needs to be done by a lot of other cities. So just have in-house urban designers who can, look at your smaller projects. You don't need to have project management consultants or external help in such projects. Yeah.
Thank you, panelists. In the interest of time, we may not be going into further Q&A, but it's great to see that around 7 to 8 questions have been answered online. I request you all to take the next 5-10 minutes to answer further questions if possible. to the attendees. We will capture the responses from the panelists and share it as a consolidated document to you soon if some questions are left unanswered. But Akanksha, over to you to summarize the panel discussion.
Thank you, Venu, and thank you everyone for such valid and solid points for the panel discussion. I'll try and briefly summarize what we all just discussed in no particular order, but first, that design needs to be for all users. It needs to be simple and functional and look beyond aesthetics. We need to look at network level and move beyond pilots now. Need to build the capacity of all stakeholders, from engineers to contractors to designers, traffic police, everyone. And even the citizens, all of us need to feel a part of the process, so to say. It's very important to embed capacities in the systems and have multidisciplinary teams. We also need to reform our mobility plans and standards while focusing on the balanced requirement of all the users. We also need to update our guidelines to accommodate the current needs and the current situation in our cities. A few also stressed on the importance of measuring and evaluation, how we need to choose our performance indicators very wisely to see how do we go ahead from here. And lastly, the importance of community participation and stakeholder consultation to better serve the context. So that is me briefly summarizing, and thank you. Over to you, Venu.
Thank you, Akanksha. I'd like to now invite Madhav Pai, CEO Interim WRI-India, to share the way forward.
Thanks, Venu. I think a lot has been said. It's been a fantastic conversation. I'll just basically, say two things, right? I think that we need, one, I think, is that I think we need to change the imagination of what streets are for the large population, right? And I think there our role is to more create campaigns, so that we are able to reach. I mean, simple things like every time we are now pushing. Every time we build a ring road, we'll build a 100-meter wide ring road. We are still talking about building very fast streets. So can we build something like this? And I'm not saying this is the idea, but the idea is to say, can we build what we call a 40-40 campaign, right? That no urban street should be wider than 40 meters, should be faster than 40 kilometers an hour. Like something that a larger population can relate to, is simple and can stick. And everybody then sort of signs up to that as a movement. So that is one thing, is right. How do we build something as a community that becomes sort of this large campaign that actually, with one or two, three ideas sort of, is able to sort of inform the larger audience. That's one side. The other side is also what we talked about, right? We want to make sure that every meter of street that gets built from today is designed as detailed design, so that the trees and the utilities and all are that accounted for, and that we design them for the people who are walking on it. So we know we are counting the number of people who are walking on it or the vehicles that are using it. So for that, we need to think about, again, how do we build the institutions, governance, procedures around that. So there is, one is a sort of a more technocratic sort of, transformation that we want to drive. The other is sort of this big campaign. And I think, I think several of us, I think on this call, and I think a lot of the people who have joined are part of that community that is going to participate to build this. We may not have one campaign, we may have 7-8 campaigns. We may have, we need at least, 10,000 teachers about, and I think how do we, and I think I see this sort of conversation as a starting point of bringing this whole community together to sort of really drive this change, drive this, bring the momentum to build this transformation. And so I think it's exciting. I think we hopefully can do many more of these conversations and, use this as a starting point to create a big movement to sort of really, talk and to get to that vision of, walkable, livable, inclusive cities that we talk about. So, yeah. But again, thank you, and back to you, Francois.
Thank you so much, Madhav, for the inspiring moments. And a big thank you to to all the panelists and attendees for joining us. While it's been some of us on the panel, I was going through the attendee names, and there are a lot of champions who have been working towards creating safer, healthier and happier cities who have joined the session. So taking this moment to appreciate all our efforts, and together we certainly can do a lot more and do better. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.